Prime Minister Narendra Modi landed in the United States of America. He landed to a rousing reception in Washington, D.C. The Prime Minister is on a 3-day, very crucial visit to the United States of America, which kicks off today with a series of meetings with top US CEOs in minutes from now. The Prime Minister will meet the US Vice President Kamala Harris and his counterparts from Australia and Japan later today.
After boarding Air India 1 in Delhi and some paperwork utilizing the long flight, Prime Minister Modi touched down at Maryland's Andrews Air Force Base for a 3-day tour. To a rousing welcome by the Biden administration and a rapturous one by the diaspora on a rain-soaked evening. Modi stepped out of his motorcade to interact with the enthusiastic crowd, chanting his name and Bharat Mata Ki Jai.
What is your take on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit and how should he engage the world?
Well, as a student, I recognize that it's a monumental time with the issues that's going around the world, especially with Afghanistan and the tremors in the Indo-Pacific. So it's a monumental time and it's great to be here while the Prime Minister is here.
I'm very happy and excited that Narendra Modi ji is in our Washington DC here. And he is such a big leader, everybody knows around the world. And he's bringing good things for India.
I look forward to this meeting especially. The changes that have taken place in Afghanistan, I'm sure it's going to be a big talk about that with President Biden.
From the airbase, Prime Minister's motorcade went straight to the Hotel Villard Intercontinental in Pennsylvania Avenue.
Massive security presence outside his hotel. That's Hotel Villard, which is where he stays normally. This time around also, he's staying at this historic hotel. And there is absolute security presence and barricading of the hotel. If you see on the right and the left-hand side, there are these cement huge block barricades to ensure that no cars really pass through this entire lane, this entire road.
Indian Americans also lined up at Modi's Washington hotel with Indian colours. Prime Minister Modi in a tweet said that diaspora is India's strength and that he was grateful for the rousing reception. India today is tracking every engagement of the Prime Minister in the United States.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi has arrived here at his hotel here, Hotel Villard. That's where he's entering the hotel. That's the tenement that has been built for him for security reasons. The entire area over here has been cordoned off. Nobody being allowed to enter this entire area. If you can see, there are security personnel who've been deployed.
He has a jam-packed day one in US. The highlight being the crucial bilateral meeting with US Vice President Kamala Harris, which is scheduled at 12:45 a.m. Indian Standard Time on Friday. He will also hold bilateral talks with Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison at 11 p.m. Indian Standard Time. But the Prime Minister kicks off his tour by meeting top 5 CEOs in Washington. Qualcomm CEO Cristiano R. Amon, Adobe Chairman Shantanu Narayan, First Solar CEO Mark Widmer, General Atomics CEO Vivek Lal, and Blackstone CEO Steven Schwarzman will be present for the meet. A bilateral meeting with US President Joe Biden, an in-person Quad meet to counter China, and a crucial address at the United Nations General Assembly. Prime Minister Modi's US tour is pivotal and path-breaking in many ways. With Geeta Mohan in Washington, Bureau Report, India Today.
So we'll talk about the political leg of this visit, the diplomatic leg of this visit. But before that, the all-important one-on-one meeting with top American CEOs, and 5 of them. The business head of one of the biggest companies, including Qualcomm, Cristiano Amon. Now, Adobe's Shantanu Narayan, First Solar's Mark Widmer, General Atomics' Vivek Lal. Again, this becomes extremely crucial given India's interest in drones, not just buy from the United States, but make in India Blackstone's Stephen Schwarzman. All of them will be meeting the Prime Minister and one-on-one. The Prime Minister will have separate meetings with these top CEOs as India pushes for a big prioritization in digital India. The meeting with Adobe's Shantanu Narayan reflects the government's agenda for a boost in the defense sector. Vivek Lal, extremely significant. It's in the process of procuring a number of those drones that the Army, the Navy and the Air Force are looking for. Of course, India is leasing drones for the Indian Navy, the Predators, as of now. So we will talk about this in greater detail. I quickly want to cut across to Zed Tarar, the spokesperson of the US State Department, joining me on the broadcast. We have a power-packed panel here on India Today. Joining me on the broadcast is Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar. Zed Tarar, spokesperson for the US State Department, joins me. Also with me is Siddharth Zarabi, Managing Editor, Business Today TV, Aba Bakaya, our Senior Editor at Business Today TV. But I want to come to you first, Zed Tarar. How is the United States looking at Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit, especially his bilaterals with US President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris?
जी गौरव जी, thank you very much. अगर आप माइंड ना कीजिए, since I'm the उर्दू हिंदी प्रवक्ता, मैं आपको जवाब हिंदी में दूंगा और ऐसे आपके ऑडियंस को भी शायद कुछ बढ़ सकते हैं आपके ऑडियंस में। तो जी, हम बहुत अहम शोबों में इंडिया के साथ मिलकर काम करते हैं, as you know, we've both discussed this before. अगर आप प्रेसिडेंट बाइडन के टॉप 3 प्रायोरिटीज़ को देखें, एंड ही मेड दिस वेरी क्लियर इन हिज यूएन जनरल असेंबली स्पीच, तो वो टॉप 3 प्रायोरिटीज़ क्या हैं इस वक्त? एक तो कोविड-19 है, टू गेट दैट अंडर कंट्रोल। दूसरी बात ये है कि हमने इस वक्त बहुत एम्बिशन के साथ climate change का मुकाबला करना है। And third is to support an international rules-based order, यानी कि जो कानूनी तौर पर हमारे rules-based order है, उसको भी हमने हमायत देनी है। So अगर आप ये जो 3 priorities हैं उनको आप देखें, तो शायद कोई ऐसा प्रायोरिटी नहीं है जिसके साथ हमने इंडिया के साथ मिलकर काम नहीं करना, whether that's vaccine production, या आप ग्रीन एनर्जी के बारे में बात करें, और इफ़ यू लुक एट द इंडो पैसिफिक, जहां हम कहते हैं कि वी वांट अ फ्री एंड ओपन इंडो पैसिफिक.
Okay. Zed Tarar for joining me here on India Today. Many thanks. Manisha Singh of the American Foreign Policy Council Board of Advisors also joins me on India Today. And Manisha Singh, if I could quickly bring you in, the Prime Minister meeting top 5 CEOs. What is India looking at, and what would the US Inc. be looking at? Because the Prime Minister held a similar meeting in 2014 when he went to the United States for the first time. Have we moved forward leaps and bounds or small steps since then to now?
Well, India, because of our skilled labor market, we have always been way ahead in our IT sector
and our capability of taking in a lot of IT jobs and businesses. But we need to make sure that this is a golden opportunity for India to make sure that we renegotiate our connection with the US and in good faith also align ourselves with the policies and principles which are very important to US. So basically, while we are growing our economy, we cannot let certain policies and principles of our country be flagged. There has to be parity. We have to make sure our entire population moves ahead in a good direction. Also, I think there are a lot of golden opportunities here for India, basically geographically and demographically, because geographically we are the biggest democracy in the Asia-Pacific region, which can really be a good friend and ally to the US when it is taking on China and Pakistan. And we also, demographically, we have 60% of our population under 30, which is like a great thing going for India. And along with our education system, I think this is going to be huge for India moving ahead.
Okay. Siddharth Zarabi, when it comes to the CEOs that the Prime Minister is meeting, defense, IT, solar power, investment. These are some of the key areas that government of India seems to be prioritizing. Let's take this one by one. When he meets the Qualcomm CEO, Cristiano Amon, the big signal, 5G tech in India?
Well, clearly that is the big signal, and one of the biggest things that will happen, not just in India, but in this part of the world, will be India's 5G auction, this auction of the spectrum, the radio waves, which will actually enable this to happen. Very few people understand this, but India is certainly, outside of China, going to be one country in this region which is advanced as far as 5G rollouts are concerned. Two of our major networks are already working hard towards that. Qualcomm is one of the largest chipset suppliers in that. You know what is happening as far as the semiconductor shortage is concerned. And Gaurav, before I toss it back to you, please look at it in this way. 5 meetings: software, telecom chipsets, private equity, solar, and drone. And this I would call the Panch Pandavas, or the the 5-pronged strategy as far as the focus is concerned. And I'm sure, from my own experience of covering such previous meetings, the Prime Minister makes it a point to explain that India is welcome to your ideas and investment.
And Ambassador Sajjanhar, that's a very important point that Siddharth Zarabi makes, that these, in a way, are the 5 key focus area, the Panch Pandavas, to win this Kurukshetra, this big battle that India is fighting. And if we were to stay a moment longer on 5G, this is where Indian interests and American interests are quite aligned, keeping China in check.
No, absolutely, you're very right, and I think what Siddharth Zarabi has also said, it's very true. Because we are now looking at new technologies, at modern technologies. We are looking at technology, we are looking at capital, we are looking at investment. And I think all that we can really look forward to getting from the United States. And these are the core areas, what he's mentioned as far as semiconductor chips are concerned, because we know that there is a shortage in the world, and that shortage is going to get even worse. There's going to be even more scarcity of the semiconductor chips, and India definitely wants to get into that. There is, as far as our defense is concerned, on drones, as far as solar energy is concerned, the renewables and the green energy, because climate is also a very important element of not only the national policies of India and the United States, but also of bilateral cooperation. Green energy, renewable energy, and India has put our target to 450 gigawatts by 2030. You'd recall that when Senator Kerry was in India, he spoke about this and he applauded and lauded this initiative in which significant progress has been made. Investments are something that we are looking for.
So I'll come to all these aspects in just a moment, Ambassador Sajjanhar. Before I bring in Abha Bakaya, I quickly want to cut across to Washington, D.C. We have India Today's Foreign Affairs editor Geeta Mohan joining me for more on this. Geeta, so moments from now in Washington, D.C., that all-important CEOs meet. Bring us what's the thinking in the Indian camp. What are the Prime Minister's key result areas, from these meetings starting in about 10 minutes from now?
Well, yes, in just moments from now, this is the gate where you'll see the top CEOs, the top 5 of the United States of America, Gaurav, enter to meet Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The format has changed. You've covered Prime Minister's visits as well in the past. You've seen that in the past he would normally have a business community gathering or a round table, but this time around he's chosen a one-on-one meetings with very important key focused areas where he'd want India and the United States of America to focus, and that's the reason why these CEOs have been chosen to be part of that entire conversation that Prime Minister Narendra Modi is going to have, each one getting a one-on-one time. Remember, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is not only going to talk about how investments should start coming into India in a post-COVID recovery plan that every country has for itself, United States of America included, but also that he's going to listen to these CEOs in what is really needed for the investments to come into India, for the manufacturing to come into India, for that business cooperation to really take place. This also, Gaurav, comes at a time when India and US are still waiting for that big FTA to really happen, for it to take place. The free trade agreement between India and US has been rather elusive for various reasons. And last time around when Prime Minister Modi was traveling here, later Donald Trump traveling to India, there was talk about some mini trade deal. That also did not happen. Expect something important to happen on the strategic front, but on the trade front, we'll still not hold our breath as of yet, Gaurav. Let's wait and see what really happens in the meetings with Biden. But before that, it's not just about G2G, it's about G2B as well. And this is that G2B connect that Prime Minister Narendra Modi is going to focus on in moments from now, after which the political and the diplomatic engagements will begin.
Okay, so when we talk about this G2B, government to business interaction, describe to us, when the 5 CEOs come, how long does the Prime Minister spend with each CEO? Will there also be presentations? Is this more of a listening? I mean, will the Prime Minister be more of a listening post in terms of listen to what the CEOs have to say? Or will the Prime Minister tell the CEOs that India is open for business?
Well, both things, Gaurav. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been saying this to the business community in the United States of America and every other country that he's been to, where we see manufacturing and we see that the economic conditions of the country is viable for them to start looking at India. So Prime Minister Modi has been doing it for a while, but this time around the conversation is going to be more focused. We do not really know whether there are going to be presentations, but the 10 to 15 minute time frame that we see Prime Minister Modi spend with each CEO is going to be focused on one, telling the CEO as to exactly what India wants from that particular sphere or sector, and also listening in to what the CEOs really have faced in terms of engaging with the business community in India, or also in terms of trying to do business with India. There are certain areas that have been of concern, certain companies that shut shop, Harley-Davidson, Ford, for example, but Gaurav, we know that Harley-Davidson was a political issue and not an economic or a truly purely business issue.
Okay.
The other parts and other aspects have to do with manufacturing and the problems that they face on the ground, and that certainly is going to be spelt out with the Prime Minister, or to the Prime Minister, when the business leaders meet him.
Okay. Stay with me if you have a moment. I know you do have to rush and interview and talk to some of these head honchos as they come in. But Manisha Singh, what is America Inc. actually looking at? Because India has been saying we are open for business and investments have gone up to a large extent. India has also moved up the ladder when it comes to ease of doing business over the years. I think from 130 in 2016 to 63 now in the World Bank ease of doing business. Manisha Singh, what is America Inc. looking at?
Well, as always, we are looking for a stable partner, definitely a democracy with aligned principles and policies. We have to make sure that politically we are stable, we are at peace, and also when we are stepping into this highly visible arena, we have to make sure that we have policies that will bring the entire country up to this level. The economic expansion is great, and I know India is hungry for this next step and for more businesses coming into India. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we have certain social policies in place which will make our working class happier, healthier, and ready to move to this next level. So we have to make sure There is parity in education, there is parity in living conditions, there is humanity parity, and we have to align. So a partnership cannot just be lopsided economically. We have to make sure all of our principles align, security, economic, social, and all of the other fronts align.
Okay, Abha Bakaya, what are steps that government has taken or is taking to make it easier for America Inc. or for different companies to invest in India from across the world?
Well, of late, there have been a slew of reforms, Gaurav, and most critical, of course, was how they've addressed the retro tax that came in back in 2014. So post that, there was a lot of criticism of the government on their tax norms, uncertainty on that front. We all know of the very high-profile cases, for example, that of Ken India, Vodafone, that came under the scanner on the back of that. Having dismissed that, they've really now opened the playing field once again. Some of those big cases are being resolved, and it's a very, very big message to the international community that the government is now listening, that they are on track to pursuing the reform agenda to a more transparent system, a more open and transparent taxation system, and they're welcoming investment into India, that they're going to do what it takes to ensure that companies find it conducive to run operations here.
Okay. Siddharth, the steps that the country has taken, for example, reduce corporate tax to 25% or allowing major stakes in some of the defense manufacturing sectors, has that impressed America Inc.? Are they more interested in investing in India, or are they looking for more?
I think a lot of the good sort of climate that's been created is the definitive shift away from difficulty of doing business to ease of doing business. And like Abha spoke about the retrospective amendment, that was the biggest sort of cloud as far as fresh investments are concerned. I've been speaking to trade representatives over the last couple of days, and everyone is saying, yes, India is a good destination. Not just the US, the United Kingdom is chasing a FTA. The UAE is chasing a FTA with India, and those conversations are happening even as we speak. So clearly, trade ties are looking up. The COVID pandemic, remember, Gaurav, had come as a sort of full stop or a break, and I think it's being taken back up, and you'll see more of this happening in the days ahead.
Okay. Now, despite COVID pandemic, I was just looking at some of the numbers. Between April 2020 and March 2021, you had $60 billion worth of investment coming into our country. Ambassador Sajjanhar, does that indicate that steps that are being taken appear to be working? Because a businessman will only put money into India, or a company will put money into India only if he gets returns on his investment.
No, you're absolutely right, Gaurav, because if I saw the figures, if I remember the figures for the whole financial year correctly, it was about $83.70 billion that came into India. And that is that is the highest FDI that India has ever got. So which really means that, the message that India is trying to send, with its Atmanirbhar Bharat and Make in India, I think that is finding resonance. And I think one of the other aspects on which there has been very fast forward movement is on PLI, Productivity Linked Incentive Scheme. And that is being expanded regularly. Every second day I find a new item is being added. There are textiles, there are electric vehicles, there are, you name it. And now I think the number of sectors that have been included is more than 13 or 14. So that means, and that is getting a lot of positive response, positive traction from the global world community. So I think the business community, the international business community is looking at India that it is serious, because, there were some question marks that were raised when India decided to move out of RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. But then I think the measures that India has taken after that and implemented and put in place, I think its credentials have been restored. But of course, India will need to continue to do more so that, this interest does not flag.
As this meeting starts, we will take sector-wise or CEO-wise, we will focus on the CEOs that the Prime Minister is meeting, and specific sectors we'll focus on. But Geeta, when India-China tension escalated post-Galwan, and when China started showing its belligerence in South and East China Sea, it was said that a lot of investment may shift out of China and India will be that natural port of call, that it would shift into India. Did that actually happen? Was that practical and pragmatic, or did enough steps be taken subsequently?
Well, absolutely right. When the Galwan incident took place and ties between China and India really dipped, relations really were at their nadir, the thought was that there needs to be supply chain resilience. India has been pushing for it, and it's not just India. The other very important country is Taiwan, Gaurav, that is looking at becoming a key to the whole global supply chain. So between India and Taiwan, the international community is now looking at how to shift manufacturing to these countries, and COVID was a huge lesson, Gaurav, where most of the equipments that were required.
Okay, give me a moment, Geeta. Let's listen in.
In the health sector did come from China.
So the Prime Minister's meeting with top CEOs begins. So you have the Prime Minister, you have the Foreign Secretary, you have India's ambassador to the United States of America on one side, CEOs on the other side. So the first meeting, the images that are coming in, Siddharth, the meeting starts with Qualcomm.
Well, as per the schedule, the President and CEO of Qualcomm, Cristiano Amon, is supposed to meet, and it's tough to take a final call with that mask, but clearly this is the first, that's the schedule that we have. Qualcomm goes first, followed by Shantanu Narayan of Adobe, and then First Solar comes after that, and then the other two meetings. So if we go by that, the General Atomics CEO will be second last, and finally one of the
Qualcomm could well prove to be a game changer. Abha, first Abha and then Siddharth.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Abha. Okay, I'll take that one. See, one of the very important points that came up as you were discussing, this is the China angle. If we really need to deepen our telecom manufacturing base, Qualcomm is the most significant company. It's been working with us for decades now. Remember, after we sort of threw out or blocked, shut the doors on certain kinds of Chinese investment, China has retaliated in an undeclared manner. Let me talk about the telecom PLI scheme. Soon after that came out, many of these Indian units, Gaurav, who were planning to start setting up equipment, one of the things that happened was some of the core equipment still had to come from China, and there were committed orders, and suddenly these Indian companies were told, and I spoke to a couple of them, that this equipment will not be available for a year. And that is the non-trade sort of measures, retaliation that China has been doing under the table. So American giant like Qualcomm, which powers the latest broadband wireless technologies all across the world, certainly a very, very important company. It has deep ties with Indian companies, and we'll hopefully get to hear more about what their intent is as far as 5G is concerned, Gaurav.
And Geeta, this is where perhaps Taiwan could play a very critical role. The resilient supply chain that we are looking at, instead of China, reliance on the United States to an extent, and Taiwan at the other end of the spectrum.
Well, absolutely. We've been having these conversations for a while now, and it's not just the international community. We see Taiwan also pushing to become, like India, become a key to the entire global supply chain market and be a part of what they can do best, which is semiconductors, chips, electronics. These are areas that are very important for in the global market. India in itself is a huge market, and India India is one of the biggest importers when it comes to these basic products from China. So instead of looking at China, if India, one, can start producing on her own and look at Taiwan, then certainly there is going to be options, and the dependence on China is certainly going to come down. That certainly is a part of the conversation, but it's only a part of the conversation. The bigger picture is that India wants to be a global player, and in becoming that global player, engaging countries such as the United States of America, we've seen a lot of engagement with the European countries as well, is truly very important, Gaurav.
Abha, are we also looking at a major Qualcomm investment in India? I mean, not just buy, but build in India and then export from India.
Well, that would be the game plan ideally, Gaurav, because think about it. These companies are companies that are not looking at an short-term target. They're looking at India 20 years from now. They're looking at global reach 20 years from now. That kind of scale. This is why the Prime Minister is quoting these businessmen. Look at the kind of industries we're talking about, whether it's telecom, whether it's solar. It's part of a much bigger vision. Private equity players, for example, Blackstone, and he's also meeting Mr. Schwarzman. And on his last trip, in fact, Steve Schwarzman had talked about how they had made record-breaking investments here in India, 6 billion in 2019. And more recently, they've also had, for instance, in March this year, Blackstone Real Estate acquired Embassy Industrial Parks from Warburg, Embassy Group, one of India's biggest logistics transactions. So, point being that they're entering segments where they see formidable scale in the future, which is intrinsic to the building of India, whether it be across segments like telecom, whether it be security, whether it be, solar, etc., etc. And of course, when it comes to some of these private equity players in real estate, logistics, and some of these segments as well. So it's a much larger game plan. And remember, in a few years ago when Trump had come down and he was quoting a businessman here, if you remember, he had that really high profile meet with Chandra, Mukesh Ambani,
yes,
everybody, and he was really talking about investing here in India. So clearly, for both countries, there is a lot at stake when it comes to really building some kind of firepower here.
Okay, and this is firepower, Ambassador Sajjanhar, as the Prime Minister has mentioned repeatedly. The biggest democracy and the oldest democracies, when they come together, they benefit not just each other, but the world at large. But are they aligned irrespective of who's in White House, Republicans or Democrats?
Yes, I think that's a very important point that you make, Gaurav, because both are democracies. Both have been democracies, since India became independent in 1947. But then, they were known as estranged democracies. But today, as the Prime Minister mentioned in his speech in 2016, it is an indispensable partnership. And that is because today both the value systems of democracies, plurilateralism, freedoms, and market economy, etc., they all converge also with convergence of interests. And these interests are huge. We've been talking about economy. We've been talking about what India needs from the United States, capital, technology, what the United States needs from India, market, defense exports, etc. But in addition to this, there's also the strategic element, in terms of dealing with terrorism, dealing with radicalism in our area, and of course, dealing with China, with an aggressive China. It's belligerent, the manner in which it has been sort of, pushing against Japan, against Taiwan in the South China Sea, against India also. And that is the result why, that is why the reason why we had the reincarnation of the Quad and the Indo-Pacific in November 2017. And that is the reason why we, a few days ago, we've also had the inauguration of AUKUS.
Yes.
So I think all these are issues that need to be, looked at from a much broader, a much more holistic perspective, rather than looking at all of them piecemeal. And today, I think there is no better partner for India than the United States. And the United States cannot hope for a better partner, in terms of meeting its strategic and security challenges and promoting its interests globally than India. A large democracy and a burgeoning market with such a demographic dividend that lies in front of it. Gaurav.
A peaceful, stable democracy a huge market, a young population, all of this. And we'll also talk about niggles. It's, you know, when two big democracies meet, there are issues where there are divergences. On the other side of a quick break, will companies like Harley-Davidson or Ford packing up from India, what signal does that send? What's the message that India is giving out? All of that and much more.